thanks for joining this evening. So good evening, everybody. Warm welcome to the launch of the Pro Bono Week. My name is David Fennelly. I'm here in my capacity as chair of the Free Legal Advice Centre's FLAC, and I'm delighted to join this event this evening for what is the start of an excellent Pro Bono week ahead. So the past year, as many of you know, it has been a very busy time for pro bono in the Irish legal profession. And in particular, this week marks the 1-year anniversary of the Pro Bono Pledge, which is a landmark step forward in the formalisation of our pro bono culture here in Ireland. FLAC and PILA, which is a project of FLAC, are delighted to be part of this initiative. And I'd like to take the opportunity at the start of this event to thank PILA and all its staff over the years, including its present staff. So Larry Donnelly, who's joining us for a chat after the formal introduction and launch, Maeve Regan, who was manager of PILA for many years, and more recently Rachel Power, Etna Lynch and Deirdre Malone, who made a huge contribution to PILA during their time working on the project and have since passed on to other roles, and the current staff, Danielle Curtis, who you'll hear from later, and Dahi, who assists her. So that the PILA team have made a huge contribution. And of course, Pro Bono has been part of FLAC's work for many years, and the broader FLAC team must be thanked as well in this regard. But a special thanks goes out to all of our supporters and partners who play such a vital role day to day in promoting pro bono in the Irish legal profession. It has, of course, a very long tradition in Ireland, but traditionally may have been described as somewhat ad hoc. And of course, over the past 10 years, including through PILA, it has gained a more formal footing in the profession, and there's a more structured and higher profile for pro bono than was the case previously. So Pro Bono Week is a great opportunity for us to mark those developments, to thank all of you who've been involved in this work throughout the year, and to kind of renew our commitment to pro bono work for the year ahead. Pro bono today, just as it has for many decades, makes a really important contribution to the legal profession, but also to society more generally, and Irish citizens and non-citizens who need pro bono assistance in order to be able to access justice. But for us as legal practitioners, it's also rewarding on a personal level as well as on a professional level. And for any participants or anybody listening this evening who's interested in getting further involved, whether as a volunteer advisor with FLAC, for example, or as a formal partner in PILA, we'll welcome you to, or advise you to get in touch. Our contact details are on the website, and really the demand for pro bono services is as high as it ever has been today. So that commitment from the profession more widely remains hugely important. So without any further ado, we'll kick off this event, and we couldn't be joined by a better array of speakers for the launch of the Pro Bono Week, and in particular because we have the President of the Law Society and the Chair of the Bar Council showing the commitment of both branches of the profession to pro bono practice, and formally launching the event coming a little bit later, Judge Clarke, who's recently retired as Chief Justice of Ireland, and who throughout his career, both as a practitioner and as a judge, demonstrated a commitment to pro bono and access to justice in a very significant way. Our first speaker this evening is Michelle Ní Longáin. Michelle has recently taken up the mantle as President of the Law Society. Michelle is a partner in the Employment Department in Byrne Wallace and is also the firm's compliance partner. She's had a distinguished track record of commitment to the Law Society through participation in very many commitments over the years prior to taking up her current role. So we're really delighted, Michelle, to have you on board for the launch of the Pro Bono Week today. And without further ado, I'll hand over to you. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you very much, David, for that introduction. And hello and welcome to everyone joining us today. I'll start by saying that I'm delighted to be here today at the launch of Pro Bono Week, And I know there's an excellent lineup of events unfolding in the coming days. The Law Society is proud to support the work of FLAC and the Pro Bono Pledge once again this year, and to be joined by our colleagues at the bar and across the legal professions in doing so. As many of you know, Pro Bono Week celebrates the work of volunteers and the impact made in support of civil society and those in need. This week acts as an agent to bring the professions together, to plan for future pro bono work, as well as to acknowledge the work already completed, much of which often flies under the radar. The undertaking of legal work for people on a pro bono basis is ingrained in the culture and tradition of the solicitor's profession in Ireland, and it is often carried out as part of solicitors' vocation and desire to help others. We remind trainee solicitors during their time at the Law Society's law school that often the case that will live longest in their minds and about which they will feel the greatest satisfaction when they reflect at the end of their careers will be a case they were never paid for and never expected to be paid for. The key message is that the cumulative effect of this work represents an important contribution by the profession to the common good. And across the legal professions, I imagine this work is unquantifiable, yet it is essential for improving access to justice. However, while we celebrate this week, we must also acknowledge that not every member of our profession can afford to work on this basis. And the contributions and the pro bono work of the professions, while they are essential, should not replace a properly funded legal aid system. An effective legal aid system is the only long-term way to ensure access to justice for all. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And they are themes which are hugely important in Pro Bono Week and every week for us as legal professions. And as you noted, this is something that the solicitors branch of the profession makes an important contribution to, and so too does the bar, the other branch of the legal profession. And we're delighted to be joined here this evening also by Maura McNally. Maura is the chair of the Bar of Ireland. Maura is a graduate of NUIG and Warwick University and the King's Inns. She was called to the bar in 1992 and became senior counsel in 2017. Maura has been the chair of the Bar of Ireland for the past year, and I think has another year in front of her, and we're delighted to have her here this evening. Maura has shown huge leadership already during her time across a whole range of issues, including in this particular area. Maura, I should hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And before I start, I would like personally to thank and commend all of those who have been supporters and contributors and volunteers to both FLAC and to the Public Interest Law Alliance, which is a part of FLAC. Barristers and solicitors, and indeed all of those who contribute to both FLAC and to PILA, all believe in justice and equality and in access to justice and in human rights. And the types of litigation in which those volunteers have been involved include areas as diverse as social welfare cases, housing and accommodation, citizenship cases, discrimination cases, equality cases, some criminal cases, personal insolvency, and also administrative law cases. Our legal system is predicated upon representation, whether that be by a solicitor or by a barrister. And for those who are unfortunate enough not to be able to afford their own solicitor or barrister, they apply for legal aid. But in too many instances, that legal aid is not forthcoming. The provision of legal aid commences under the Civil Legal Aid Act of 1995, 1995, but it is too limited. It looks to disposable income. It also looks for contributions from persons who apply for civil legal aid. And you'll note from some of the type of cases I have mentioned, it is invariably those who are amongst our more impoverished, downtrodden individuals who are the ones seeking legal aid. Our European Convention on Human Rights at Articles 6 and 13, they enshrine the right of access to justice. The European Charter on Fundamental Rights guarantees the right to a fair trial. Yet our civil legal aid system falls short of those guarantees. And in fact, on occasion, it would seem that they are simply aspirational. As homelessness grows in Ireland, particularly when you think of last night where temperatures dropped to -3, when we think of the multitude of our citizens and residents who are sleeping rough on the streets or in inappropriate accommodation, this Pro Bono week allows us the opportunity to put a spotlight on that issue. And that is a human right issue, but it is a human right issue which is not covered by civil legal aid. So if you have a litigation in respect of housing or accommodation, you are not covered by the civil legal aid system. And unfortunately, that gap has to be filled by the volunteer work of solicitors and barristers. We try and represent the most vulnerable in our society. And unfortunately, amongst those most vulnerable, every year are included thousands of children. In fact, in 2019, there were almost 10,000 cases of homelessness, and 1/3 of those were children. FLAC and PILA has been filling that gap where legal aid is not available. And all too often, that gap is widening. Lawyers do not have limitless resources. We freely give of our time and professionalism, yet it would seem that the more we do, the more we assist, then the more that is expected of us by our government. The gap is growing and growing wider. One must ask, where is our government? Where is this greater assistance? Where is the support for our disadvantaged, our impoverished, our downtrodden citizens and residents? We cannot and should not create a two-tier system. We cannot and should not allow a two-tier system. Overview of the civil legal aid system and indeed the criminal legal aid system is long overdue. 75% of barristers engage in pro bono work. We do so because of our belief in human rights, because we believe in the protection of those human rights. Yet the growing lack of governmental support by way of legal aid in assuring access to justice must not become a further straw that will break the donkey's back. It is time that the civil legal aid system was properly and appropriately reviewed, and that the downtrodden, the impoverished, those that the government seem to ignore, those 10,000 citizens and more, are properly represented. I wish good luck to all of you engaged this week in the various activities that are taking part. And I also wish to assure both FLAC and PILA of the ongoing support from the Bar of Ireland. And I commend every volunteer and all your efforts. And thank you for listening to me.
Thanks so much, Maura. And they are really important words. And let me just lend my voice to your call just now, because over 40 years on from the European Court of Human Rights judgment in Erie versus Ireland, we still are in a position where civil legal aid is really wanting, and criminal legal aid for that matter. In that famous judgment, the Court of Human Rights stressed how it was important that access to justice was practical and effective, not just theoretical and illusory. And today we know we are still very far off from practical and effective access to justice in so many areas, such as those that you've just mentioned. And that really makes it important that the review of civil legal aid, which is proposed, is a meaningful review. When you look back at the Pringle report of the late 70s, you see a very thorough and rigorous review, and nothing less is required this time around, given that the issues that have just been identified. So thank you, Maura, for raising those really important concerns. And now I'm delighted to hand over to our our distinguished guest, who is kindly agreed to launch Pro Bono Week this year, and that is Judge Clarke, who up until recently was Chief Justice of Ireland, a person who needs no introduction to this audience. And I give a brief official bio of Judge Clarke, if I may, and then I might just add a few elements which to us here in FLAC and PILA are of particular importance. Judge Clarke, as many of you know, had a very distinguished career at the bar before being appointed to the High Court in 2004, later appointed to the Supreme Court in 2012 before taking up the role of Chief Justice in 2017, from which he has just recently retired, as I mentioned. But throughout his career, Judge Clarke had a real commitment to pro bono, as we describe it and know it today. And indeed, recently, Judge Clarke reflected on one of his early cases as a barrister, which was the landmark challenge in State Healy and Donoghue. And of course, during his time as Chief Justice, Judge Clarke also put great emphasis on access to justice, setting up a committee to consider these issues, and before retiring, putting in place an excellent conference which considered so many issues across the broader canvas of access to justice. It's really, I think, is an important moment for us in the legal profession in bringing the stakeholders together, because one of the challenges can be bringing the diverse parties with an interest in this important topic together to try to come up with creative solutions for that. So thank you for that, Judge Clarke. And of course, more recently, Judge Clarke, even in the short time since his retirement, has spoken out about important issues in the legal profession more widely, and in particular concerns about the rule of law and other member states of the European Union, recently speaking at the University of Warsaw on these important issues, and I think tomorrow addressing the Institute of International and European Affairs. So I think that all is testament to Judge Clarke's commitment to the issues which are at the heart of Pro Bono Week. And without any further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Judge Clarke to formally launch this week's events. Thank you, Judge Clarke.
Thank you very much, David, and colleagues and friends. It really is a great pleasure to have been asked to formally launch the Pro Bono Week of FLAC and PILA. One of the themes that we addressed at the conference, which David has just mentioned, was the fact that there's perhaps no single silver bullet that will solve all access to justice issues. A whole range of measures need to be adopted, and I fully agree with the comments just made about the need to seriously address the question of civil legal aid and its inadequacies. And therefore, while I concentrate in my remarks today on pro bono work, I wouldn't like that to detract from the need to adopt other measures which may be necessary to properly establish true access to justice in Ireland. As has been mentioned by a number of those who've spoken earlier, actually pro bono work in Ireland goes back a very long way. FLAC itself was founded over 50 years ago by young lawyers who are anxious to provide their time and expertise to assist those who needed legal aid, but didn't have legal aid available to them. At that stage, there was no civil legal aid, let alone an inadequate system of civil legal aid. And there was a criminal legal aid system which ran into the very difficulties that led to the Healy and Donoghue case, which David mentioned. So there is a very long history in Ireland of lawyers being willing to give their time and expertise free of charge without any expectation of being paid. But I suppose one reflection of the alterations that occur over time, which someone who's been around as long as I have maybe is in a position to comment on, is that models that work at one stage, or maybe of assistance at least at one stage, do need to be reviewed from time to time. As things get more complex, as the scale of operations become bigger, it's sometimes necessary, for example, to have more formal institutions in place or more formal arrangements in place to ensure the adequacy of delivery, where less formal operations may have worked well in the past. And while it would be important on an occasion such as this, where we're encouraging greater use of pro bono and a greater organization of pro bono. It's important to recognize the very many contributions that have been made by solicitors and barristers over the years without expectation of payment. It nonetheless is worth commenting that perhaps in current conditions, that does need the slightly more formalized arrangements which give birth to ideas such as the pro bono pledge. A further reflection is perhaps one directed to lawyers who may think that their areas of expertise are not necessarily those that might lend themselves very easily to pro bono work. Other speakers have identified the kind of areas that typically come up, the kind of areas where it is likely that there may be a legal angle to a person's difficulties, but where that person is equally unlikely to be in a position to be able to afford legal assistance to vindicate whatever rights they may have. And those who work perhaps in areas that don't overlap with those might sometimes question whether they too could make a contribution. But I have to say, in my experience, good lawyers can bring their skills to bear in areas well outside those in which they habitually practice. Experienced people who are used to finding legal solutions to issues don't really take too long to be up to speed on a problem which is given to them. And therefore, I would urge those who might think that their area of practice, their area of developed expertise mightn't particularly fit with the kind of areas that need the primary focus of pro bono work, to consider whether it might well be, as David said, advantageous not only to them, but to the potential persons whom they might help to put their hat in the ring. They can learn new tricks. A good lawyer can always learn new tricks. A good lawyer can always adapt to new situations and apply their developed expertise in new areas. And that can be valuable for the lawyer, and it can be valuable for those who benefit by it. And indeed, sometimes people bringing expertise from one area into a new area can think of creative ways in which that the area into which they move can develop. We sometimes can get into silo mentalities in areas of the law where we think, well, that's the way it's always been done, and there's no need or no likelihood of that changing. Sometimes someone applying expertise gained in a different area can bring something new to the table, and that can be a very valuable part of the exercise. And one other general reflection might be to also pay attention to the importance sometimes of major test cases, both in the development of the law generally and indeed in promoting access to justice. And Healy and Donoghue is itself a very good example of that. Since then, there has been a criminal legal aid system, which has been a very significant improvement on that which went before, although, as I mentioned at the Access to Justice conference and echoing what was said earlier, that doesn't mean that we should regard the current criminal legal aid system as perfect. It needs review and it needs addressing a number of issues that have arisen because of evolution in the way in which criminal practice takes place. But it certainly is the case that a single test case brought in effect through FLAC with lawyers who were working pro bono made a major contribution to the evolution of the law in that area and made real changes to the practice over many decades. So the use of strategic, significant litigation can also form part of the utilization of pro bono work to make very significant gains. Now, obviously, a lot of pro bono work may be solving individuals' problems, but some of it may extend further to solving generic problems, systemic problems, and may generate real progress. And we also all know that some of these problems are ones which, while they may in part have a legal solution, also require a political solution. And that sort of public interest litigation can also play a role in that regard. It can create a focus on an issue which may not be completely soluble within the legal space, but which may be capable of partial solution in that space, but also may focus attention on other parts of the problem which may require to be solved elsewhere, perhaps in Leinster House rather than in the forecourts. And again, those willing to undertake those significant public interest cases on a pro bono basis can make a huge contribution in that regard. And I would see perhaps the current focus of pro bono work as firstly forming a part of that multifaceted solution to access to justice, of which I've spoken a lot, and which was a principal focus of the Access to Justice conference organised by the Chief Justice's Working Group. That's one element. A further element is to encourage further engagement by the legal professions to build on the already substantial contribution which very many solicitors and barristers are already making to providing pro bono work, but also perhaps to provide a debate about how we can better focus the work of those more than willing to provide their services on a pro bono basis to achieve the maximum advantage. All of these elements can come together, in my view, both to enhance the experience of the lawyers involved, to enhance the public recognition of the fact that many lawyers, contrary to the public impression, do give of their time free of charge to help those who need legal assistance, but also to advance the cause of access to justice generally. As others have said, pro bono work is not the sole solution. Indeed, it would be very wrong to regard it as that, because that would allow the other elements of the solution to escape the attention which they need. But it is, in my view, an important part of the solution. The involvement of the stakeholders in PILA and in FLAC is to be greatly welcomed. And it gives me great pleasure on this occasion to launch the Pro Bono Week and encourage those involved, and indeed perhaps those who have not yet been involved, to further their effort to ensure that this element of the solution is enhanced to the greatest extent possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judge Clarke. And again, just really important words and also perspective on these important issues, and in particular, kind of the multifaceted nature of the problem. Of course, pro bono isn't going to be a substitute itself for an effective legal aid system, but it has an important role across the various dimensions you outlined. And of course, today we've heard from the Law Society and from the Bar of Ireland. And we must also acknowledge that there are many other lawyers as well in the country, whether working in-house or indeed in academic institutions, who contribute of their time in a valuable way through those diverse perspectives and approaches that Judge Clarke mentioned. And on that note, it's appropriate to turn over to the next stage of this evening's event. And we're delighted to have Larry Donnelly and Danielle Curtis for a fireside chat. Larry will be familiar to many of you. He's a lecturer in law at NUIG. He's also a commentator on political matters, who you may find here on the radio and find late at night during US presidential elections, among other things. And within his distinguished career, Larry spent a few years with PILA as manager of PILA at a really important moment in its development. So we're particularly delighted to have you back here this evening. Recently, Larry has published his book, The Bostonian, with Gill Books, which is available in all good bookshops at the moment. And tonight, Larry is going to conduct a fireside chat with our PILA boss at the moment, which Danielle Curtis. And Larry, without any further ado, I'll hand over to you. Thanks so much for joining us this evening, and thanks too to Danielle for taking part in this event.
Thanks very much, David, for that very, very kind introduction. I really appreciate it. And it's really an honor to be involved in this event. FLAC and PILA, organizations that I have huge regard for, and that they mean so much to me, not just at a professional level, but also at a personal level, because I know how deep the commitment to access to justice runs within FLAC, and that's an extraordinary thing. And I'm delighted to be taking part in this, and honored to be talking to Danielle. Danielle Curtis is the new legal officer with PILA, and someone who's a graduate of Dublin City University, a qualified barrister, a student activist, if I might say that myself, and someone who I think brings an awful lot of good things to the PILA project. And again, this idea of access to justice and everything that FLAC has stood for so many years. And that people like David Fennelly, now the chair of FLAC, and Mr. Justice Clarke, and lots of others who've spoken already, have brought to FLAC and know how much it means to Ireland's legal culture. So it's an honor to be part of this evening's event. That all having been said, I might just say to Danielle, maybe for those, the uninitiated perhaps, or those who are learning a little bit tonight, maybe set the scene for us here in terms of PILA and PILA's origins and development. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry, for your very kind introduction. So just to kind of set the scene for everyone. So in 2009, with the assistance of Atlantic Philanthropies, FLAC embarked on a new project with a particular focus on development of public interest law in Ireland. And from this, PILA was born. So PILA is a public interest law network that seeks to engage the legal community and civil society in using the law to advance social change. So just to break down public interest law and what it means within FLAC's work, it means a way of working with the law for the benefit of vulnerable and disadvantaged individuals and communities for the protection of their human rights. So for PILA, this can come in many shapes and forms, such as legal education sessions to educate individuals on their rights. It can also mean input into the democratic processes, such as law reform groups, or it can mean access to the courts on not only public law matters, but also private law issues as well. Through PILA, FLAC has begun to actively promote pro bono as one of a suite of strategies, which a lot of our esteemed guests have spoken about this evening, that have the potential to increase access to justice. PILA's work has established significant infrastructure that delivers more effective pro bono services. And at the core of this is our pro bono referral scheme, which I'm sure I'll touch on later as we work through and talk through the work of PILA. One thing I will say, though, is since establishment in 2009, it's really provided kind of concrete evidence of the real difference that PILA has made to our stakeholders, and more importantly, the people we work for and we serve, so our NGOs and their service users. We really, one thing I will say is since establishment in 2009 and building up the Public Interest Law Alliance, we've seen an increasingly vibrant culture for pro bono work, legal work, which has emerged in Ireland.
Very good. One of the things that Maura and Michelle and the Chief Justice spoke about was the culture of pro bono, and that the fact that indeed Irish lawyers have been good-hearted and done these types of things for a long time. But one of the things that PILA, at least in my time in PILA, and we continue to talk about, is this emerging culture of pro bono. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think even before PILA, so I think from the outset, we need to just, I suppose, pay homage to the comments of our esteemed speakers this evening and acknowledge that lawyers across the profession have long demonstrated a commitment to pro bono work, such as no foul, no fee, the Bar Voluntary Assistance Scheme, and then the extensive network of community law centres which have been established. So I'll try paint a picture of this, this emerging culture of pro bono. So since 2009, the pro bono ecosystem in Ireland has really evolved greatly. We had a paradigm shift in mind. So we went from loosely organized activities undertaken on individual initiatives to coordinated, well-structured pro bono delivery that is proactive, accessible, and strategic in bringing together the legal services to those most in need. Just to demonstrate that shift in a number of ways. Firstly, we've seen an increased demand placed on PILA as a service. So since creation in 2009, Larry, we've seen 1,400 pro bono referrals to PILA in all different areas. Within the first 12 months of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a huge increase in the demand for our services, receiving 210 pro bono referrals during this period. And this was from a myriad of NGOs who were all adapting to a new way of working in light of the pandemic. This included 4 impact projects, which in itself, just to touch on impact projects, is a development in itself in the pro bono sector. So traditionally, PILA would assist an NGO with a once-off piece of work, but over the years, we've seen the rise in the need for ongoing legal support, which led to the establishment of an impact project. So just for those listening, this is where a law firm and NGO forge an ongoing partnership to fill an unmet legal need. So the first one of these was established in 2013, and it saw a partnership between A&L Goodbody and Irish Refugee Council, which is still ongoing today, to bring early legal advice to asylum seekers. So since then, we've developed 12 impact projects, which all respond to an unmet legal need, 4 of which were established in 2021 alone. So that alone shows that we've moved from more informal kind of pro bono support to more targeted and strategic like pro bono support over a longer period of time. I will say all of this work that we've done over this period would not be possible without our extensive network of pro bono lawyers. So since we were established in 2009, you can really see the appetite of pro bono growing, because we now work with 52 partner law firms, 350 individual lawyers, 8 partner in-house teams, and 15 partner universities and law schools. Another area, so secondly, we now see law firms taking on secondary specializations in areas outside of their expertise, such as housing and immigration law. And we've also seen the appointment of dedicated pro bono associates and partners. So we have Ethna Lynch from A&L Goodbody, Caroline Minnick from Arthur Cox, and Niamh Coonahan from Madison, who was appointed this year as a partner in with Madison for pro bono. Outside of the dedicated role to pro bono, many firms have seen associates and partners lead on pro bono work within their firms alongside their day-to-day work, such as Owen McAda and Eversheds, Mary Brazel in McCann Fitzgerald, and Stephen Kerwin in Katie Lines. So you can really see the appetite growing for pro bono within firms. And from the bar, you have Lewis Mooney, who coordinates the voluntary assistance scheme of the Bar of Ireland. I just want to take a moment and just pause and to thank them alongside all of our Alliance members for their continued work and support. And then finally, Larry, in my whistle-stop tour of the emerging culture of pro bono, but by no means least development, I just want to highlight the Pro Bono Pledge. So it was launched in November 2020, and this year actually marks the 1-year anniversary. So the pledge is the first collaborative effort in Ireland to articulate a shared responsibility of lawyers to promote access to justice. And I just want to highlight that it is a collaborative effort in Ireland to articulate that shared responsibility. It provides not only a common definition of pro bono, but also a minimum commitment to 20 aspirational hours per lawyer per year. Within the pledge itself, which launched in last year, we have 50 law firms, 38 barristers, 2 in-house legal teams, and 7 individual solicitors signed up for the pledge. So as you can see, in the space of 12 years since PILA was established, the pro bono landscape in Ireland has developed vastly, and we've now moved towards more coordinated and collaborative efforts to addressing pro bono in Ireland.
It really is extraordinary how swiftly things have moved in terms of the formalization of structures around pro bono, which is really extraordinary. I think it's a credit to everyone in PILA, and more importantly, I suppose to the lawyers who have dove into this with such gusto and such enthusiasm. One of the things, just to say, to us, and I suppose to most people who are listening, it's axiomatic that pro bono legal work is a good thing, that it is something we should do. But let's say, give us some examples. Do you have some tangible examples of where pro bono lawyers have done amazing things for people. Do you have standout examples that you could point out?
Yeah, so just to kind of say to that, so the gap between the legal needs of marginalized and disadvantaged communities and the resources that are currently available to meet those needs is still huge. And closing that gap to justice is now more urgent than ever, given the impact the pandemic has already had and continues to have on vulnerable communities. So we've seen that kind of pro bono has and can bridge this gap. And to give you some examples of where that has happened, and we've seen really the really big impact of pro bono. So a great example of pro bono work with broader societal impact would be the referral that we had from the Blind Legal Alliance. So the Blind Legal Alliance was established by Robbie Sinnott, who has severe visual impairment, and their first action was to campaign for the right to a secret ballot in elections and referenda in Ireland. So at the time, if a person with a visual impairment wished to vote, they had to do so through either a presiding officer or a trusting friend. So Robbie came to PILA to look to challenge this, to challenge the state's failure to put in place the mechanisms to enable him to vote in secret. So something that we probably, as everyday citizens, would take for granted. So on the basis of Robbie's referral, we sought a legal opinion from Senior Counsel Michael Lynn on the legal basis for challenging the current method of voting. So the opinion found that Ireland was actually in breach of its obligations to the EU under the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and the time was opportune to challenge current procedures in advance of the European elections, which were due to take place in May 2014. So PILA then approached one of our supporting partners, Eversheds, who came on board on a pro bono basis. And after 9 days in the High Court, the case succeeded in March 2017 in securing a declaration that the state had a duty to put a mechanism in place to facilitate visually impaired persons to vote in secret. The case provided clarity on the duty of the minister to ensure a secret ballot as far as reasonably practical. And the real impact of that case was that in May 2018, Robbie Sinnott, who brought the referral to PILA, voted in secret for the first time during the referendum on the 8th Amendment. So not only did that impact Robbie himself, it also had a huge broader societal impact on those who are visually impaired. I suppose if I now turn to a more recent example of pro bono in action, I can't not mention the pro bono response that we've seen to the Afghan crisis, which occurred this year. So this is not only an excellent example of a recent example of pro bono, but also of firms working in collaboration with each other to assist those who may be vulnerable. So we all know in August of 2021, we had the fall of the government in Afghanistan, which resulted in an ongoing humanitarian crisis. So the Irish Refugee Council received over 2,000 calls from the Afghan community in Ireland seeking to bring their family members to safety. With a small legal team, it wasn't possible for them to meet the enormously increasing demand for urgent representation. So through PILA, the Irish Refugee Council already had a long-established partnership with A&L Goodbody, who immediately came on board with huge interest, and support came from across the firm. And they made the referral the same day as they brought the project to A&L, and only 3 days after the Taliban had taken over. So since then, a team of 80 lawyers have been working with 29 Afghan clients, supporting multiple applications for discretionary visas on behalf of their family members seeking to come to Ireland. But this has had a knock-on effect. So they've also made referrals to Arthur Cox, who have been working closely with the Immigrant Council of Ireland on this project, and have commenced similar referral partnerships for the Afghan project with Madison and Philip Lee. So through PILA, we've seen this project take off, but we've also seen further firms outside of Dublin come on board to support organisations outside of Dublin supporting the Afghan community in Ireland. So that example is obviously an ongoing example of pro bono support, but one that happened very suddenly, humanitarian crisis which happened very suddenly, and the pro bono community just reacted very promptly and were able to assist.
it's absolutely wonderful to hear that. And when you say something like the pro bono community, one of the things in my time working in PILA was that there would be competition, but it seems to me that the ethos of pro bono transcends law firms, and the firms work together and are happy to collaborate and work for the common good on issues that are so important like this one. And I suppose to that end, one of the questions I'd like to put to you, and I think the Chief Justice mentioned it earlier, is that lots of lawyers in Ireland are doing pro bono work. Still more will join, one hopes. But give us, I suppose, both the moral and the business case for why pro bono work is so important.
Yeah, definitely. So as was reflected on by our speakers, like there are many reasons for doing legal pro bono work. The first that generally comes to mind are the moral arguments. So thinking about the clients, the causes, and it just generally being the right thing to do. So there's been a long-standing tradition because of this within the legal profession. But aside from this, what I think is often overlooked is the business case for pro bono work. So an active pro bono practice can improve legal skills, assist in recruitment and development of junior lawyers, demonstrate a firm or organization's corporate social responsibility, and also attract value matched clients. So one thing I will say to that end is, and I think Justice Clarke reflected on it very greatly, is some lawyers will often think that their skill set doesn't lend itself to pro bono because they often think of the large public interest litigation matters or the human rights law, such as housing and immigration. But when it comes to undertaking pro bono work, there is a piece of pro bono work for everyone. And no matter if you're an individual practitioner, an in-house lawyer, running a small, medium or large firm, or a barrister down at the bar practicing, there is a piece of pro bono work that fits everyone's skill set. And that said, when you're a lawyer, you can generally turn your hat to kind of any area of law with the proper training and supervision in that area of law. 70% of the referrals at PILA that we receive at PILA are from NGOs seeking support with day-to-day operations and governance of their organizations. So an example of literally a referral I received today of this nature was from an NGO who wished to review their internal policies and employment contracts. So many firms on this call or involved or developing their pro bono already have established practice in this area of work. So it's something they're already doing in their day-to-day. I think another case for pro bono and a call to the legal community is the fact that COVID-19 has seen significant impact on vulnerable groups and communities supported by PILA's NGO partners. Many people will suffer from a variety of legal problems, such as loss of employment, difficulty accessing social welfare or housing issues, and domestic violence. So these issues are likely to continue long after the crisis is over. And the need for assistance to address the unmet legal need is greater than ever. So the past 2 years has really called upon all of us to contribute to building more equal, inclusive and sustainable society, and really kind of prompted the legal community to use their skill set to support those who are most vulnerable. As we continue to face those times of uncertainty, there's no doubt that the commitment and collaboration, which we've seen in some of the projects that I mentioned, but also under the pledge, that will continue to really matter and be as important as ever. And to kind of build a case for pro bono and engaging for pro bono work, I'll recall on one of the words of our pledge signatories, which I find a good quote. So he said that we lawyers have superpowers to use for our clients. And when we use them for people who are excluded from justice because of disadvantage, we do some of the work that we're most proud of. And I think that really speaks to the ethos of pro bono within the legal profession and the skill set that you bring, the unique skill set that lawyers can bring to pro bono in Ireland. And I think that is a case in itself.
Yeah, absolutely agreed on the unique skill set. And I think the pledge is remarkable. And how the traction it's gained in a very short space of time is extraordinary. Let's push back for a second. There are critics out there, and there's no point in ignoring some of the criticisms. I'll put two of them to you. One of them I think you adverted to a minute ago, in the sense that potentially well-meaning lawyers can be in difficult situations in areas that they mightn't have an expertise or the requisite expertise. That's one criticism. The second criticism is that opportunistic politicians potentially can see pro bono as a cover for not properly funding legal aid in the way that they should. And I suppose to those 2 points, what does PILA say?
Yeah, so that's very valid question in terms of the kind of the criticism of pro bono work more generally. But before addressing those, I just want to reflect on one of our kind of core challenges, and it's kind of a call out to the legal community again, which is meeting the demands placed on PILA as a service to ensure we can maintain that well-resourced infrastructure. So to that end, we at PILA are very grateful for the continued support of our sustaining and supporting partners, because without this, we wouldn't be able to meet the demands placed on our service. We also, we at PILA, we know we're set up as a model to assist NGOs. However, we're very aware that there remains this unmet legal need for individuals, which was highlighted by a lot of our speakers this evening. This is evidenced by the increased demand that the FLAC information and referral line has experienced since the outbreak of COVID-19. We've seen an increase of individuals seeking advice from PILA, particularly in areas of employment, immigration, and family law. So in employment law alone, the FLAC phone lines would have received approximately 2,000 calls. But I know from my day-to-day work at PILA that FLAC is not alone in these challenges, as on a weekly basis, I meet with NGOs who are struggling to meet the increased demands placed on their services. So PILA works kind of around the clock to try address these needs and see how we can support them. So with that in mind, there is a significant need for support in areas such as employment and traveller, housing, social welfare, and immigration law. But the supply in this area is increasingly limited, and I think that's where you fall into the possible where you get the possible criticisms that you see lawyers taking on pieces of work that they generally may not have the skill set or the practice area in. Because we at PILA see that this demand places a challenge in itself, and we often seek law firms that are willing to undergo training in these areas to help bridge the gap. So I suppose this kind of brings me nicely to the first challenge you highlighted, and which was one that was lamented by our speakers at the very beginning, and that was the that legal aid system and the possibility that building a robust pro bono system may lead to governments to relying on pro bono rather than providing a well-resourced legal aid system. And one thing we at FLAC feel is that no matter how robust a system of pro bono support that FLAC can build, none of our strategies can replace or are a substitute for a poorly resourced legal aid system. So to borrow, as David did earlier from the Airy judgment, a legal aid system should be practical and effective. And FLAC continue to advocate, alongside running the Public Interest Law Alliance project, for a root and branch review of the current system. And we welcome Minister McEntee's commitment in February this year to review the civil legal aid system as part of the Department of Justice Action Plan. Turning now to your second criticism that you raised. So the second challenge posed being around the level of service expected from a pro bono referral, and lawyers that will take on areas of practice not necessarily in their remit. So all of our legal assistance provided through PILA must and is given the same priority as paid work and is completed to the same high standards by all of our alliance members. Our legal partners will agree to complete the work to an agreed deadline and to the NGO's satisfaction. So we request that all partner law firms and lawyers sign and implement a pro bono protocol to help with the internal management of pro bono matters. So, and then to reflect on lawyers then who may take on work outside of the scope of their expertise, Rest assured, with all of our referrals, PILA ensure that all of our referrals are matched with the lawyer who has both the capacity and the suitable skill set and knowledge to undertake the piece of work. And I think this in itself is a testament to having a well-coordinated and structured pro bono service, and that we ensure that when we are matching, that the lawyer that is taking on the work is well resourced, both in skill set and in capacity to take on the matter. This generally at the moment only would arise in our impact projects. So in the planning stages of these, PILA ensures that a law firm or legal practitioners, if they don't already have the adequate skill set, that they obtain these through legal training and supervision. So a great example of this support and action would be the A&L Good Body Mercy Law and Focus Ireland Housing Law Clinic. So as part of that project in December 2017, 67 solicitors, trainees and paralegals undertook legal training in housing provided by Mercy Law. Following a period of shadowing Mercy solicitors, the A&L Good Body lawyers were ready to start seeing clients through a weekly clinic at Focus Ireland. And notwithstanding this training initially, the firm continued to be supported in their training by Mercy Law solicitors who were experts in the area of housing law. So thanks to this partnership approach, which we apply to all of our impact projects, the service has been able to respond to the escalating crisis, but we've also ensured that the lawyers responding have the adequate skill set and capacity to take on the matters, so that people that are receiving pro bono work are not only receiving free legal advice and representation, but also a good standard of legal advice and representation.
Very good. Our time is sadly drawing to a close, so I'm going to put you under pressure here now. In 30 seconds, I'd like to hear your vision for pro bono in Ireland as guided by FLAC and PILA. 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Wow. Well, I hope we have a great week ahead for Pro Bono Week. We'll also, I'd love to see an expansion of Pro Bono Pledge Ireland to an All-Ireland pledge. And this is something we're beginning to work on, so that it's just not, because at the moment it's just Republic of Ireland. I'd also like to see further development of impact projects, a better resourced legal aid system, and also be able to increase the legal information session and supports we have available to the NGO community. And then lastly, very excitingly, it was supposed to happen 2021, but PILNET Global Forum will take place in 2022 from the 17th to the 19th of October. So it's a very exciting year for pro bono ahead.
That's absolutely brilliant. It's great to absolutely great to hear. Danielle, thanks so much. And I know that there's a video now coming here just illustrating the impacts of pro bono that have happened this year in a very difficult time. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for being involved in this. Thank you to all the guest speakers. And I think the video is coming up now.